Hey, it's Alan, and I just wanted to let you know that you can now listen to the ongoing history of new music early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Hi, it's Alan, and this week we're going to do something a little different for the podcast. When we recorded our 1000th episode of the ongoing history of new music at Corus Quay, we ended up with a lot of content that we couldn't quite fit into the radio show. If you caught last week's podcast, you will have heard the story of how the ongoing history came to be and how we got to 1,000 shows. You would have also heard part of the Q&A session we did with the Q107 morning show and our live audience. But there was so much recorded that night, we didn't want any of it to go to waste. And that's why we thought, well, why not do a second podcast of just that part of the night that didn't make the radio show? So here is the full Q&A session from the 1000th episode of the ongoing history of new music, recorded live at Corus Quay back on December the 5th of 2023. I think you're going to like this.
This is the ongoing history of new music podcast with Alan Cross.
Please welcome from Q107 Toronto, the morning show, Shauna, Ryan, and Johnny.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alan.
We have a secondary set.
Yeah. How's everyone doing okay?
I didn't want your part to end. I'm not ready for us yet. That was amazing.
North Korea doesn't know what it's missing.
I know.
And a few countries in West Africa. Well,
I've actually been to North Korea.
Oh, yeah?
I did. Well, I went through the South Korean side. I went on the South Korean DMZ side, and there's these huts in the middle where they do all the negotiations, and there's a conference table with a line down the middle that represents the border between North and South Korea. And as long as you stay in the hut, you can go on the other side of the conference table.
Oh, yeah.
So technically, I have been to South Korea.
Amazing.
Very cool.
I wanted to start because I think we can all agree you're probably the coolest person in the room, but there, right? Absolutely the king of cool. But there has to be some artist or even a song that you can admit to liking that would just embarrass you. Are you secretly a Swiftie?
Oh, God.
Come on.
Don't get me started on Tay-Tay. I just... No, for the longest time, if you were working at an alternative radio station, you couldn't admit that you liked non-alternative music. So if you were in 1996 said, you know what, I kind of like Led Zeppelin or Judas Priest, you would be completely ostracized, probably fired and beaten up on the way out. And I was always a giant April Wine fan. And, you know, the fact that Miles Goodwin died over the weekend, it's like, oh my God, that was a terrible blow because he was such a, you know, major influence on my early rock and roll life. So yeah, I was an April Wine fan, but I always had to listen very, very quietly and by myself, unless the rest of the staff found out.
You've had 1,000 episodes. Is there any subject or band or story that you haven't been able to tell yet that you're looking forward to?
Here's how it works. Remember what it was like in high school where it's Sunday night, Family Guy is over. You've got an assignment due the next day, and you haven't started on it yet. Remember that feeling that you used to get in your stomach? That's what I get every week. Like, what am I going to talk about? And I try to work many weeks ahead just in case I have a massive brain freeze and I'm unable to come up with something. That has never happened yet, but I can tell you that there have been some shows that did not want to be born. I get into the weeds and I get lost and I can't find my way out of it. Eventually
Weeds
I do.
Or weed?
Yeah.
Oh God, whatever works.
Yeah.
And then there are some shows that, 2 hours, I'm done. Usually it takes about 10 hours to write a show. 10 hours to write and research, write and record a show, maybe 10 to 14 hours, somewhere around there. So it takes up an awful lot of my work week.
You spend more time prepping one show than I've prepped in 23 years of radio.
Well, see, the thing is, I am all about detail and telling you stuff that you don't know. That's my whole thing. Now, I live this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I've been doing it for a very long time. So I've got a lot of baggage. I got a lot of prejudices and biases and just, you know, the things that come with age. And I have to keep remembering that just because I know some stuff or have run across some stuff, everybody else hasn't because they have lives. So what I try to do is find stuff that makes me go, wow, that's cool. So if it makes me go, wow, that's cool, somebody who's been doing this for so long, imagine the kind of effect it's going to have on a person with a social life. Right. And then the other thing too is if I say something that's really interesting to someone, they're going to go, oh, I got to remember that. And then what they're going to do is they're going to talk to their friends. Music inevitably comes up, and they're going to repeat what I said to them. And their friends are going to go, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that, giving them validation. So who is that person grateful to? Me, because I made them look good in the eyes of their friends. I mean, and that's not an ego thing. It's just like, what can I do to make the life of anyone listening to this program richer in some way? Give it the music context, give it background, give it emotional meaning, because streaming is magic, but it's really organized noise. It goes in one ear and out the other. Nobody is there to tell you anything about the song, the artist, the album, the scene, the sound, the history, the recording process, any of that stuff. That's my job. And it makes music much more interesting if you know where the music is coming from and where the artist was coming from.
I just, the names that you've talked to, the people, the epic artists, how do you deal with sitting down and you must be nervous when you speak to these huge legends and they're in front of you. How do you handle that?
Well, I am a fan, first of all, but I'm a proxy for everybody who wishes they could be in the room there with me. So it is my job to get them to say something that they haven't told anybody else. Again, detail, wow, that's cool. And there is a standard sort of way about going to get the interview. There's 4 steps that you have to go through. The first step is you walk into the room and you have to show propriety. In other words, you are behaving properly. You're not overly familiar. You're not dismissive. You're not rude. Any of that sort of stuff. So propriety. That's followed by comfort. If they show you, propriety, then that's followed by competence. So if you show them you're behaving properly and that you are competent as a journalist, as an interviewer or whatever, you know about the artist, you know about the album, you know why you're there, well, that's good. So you're behaving properly, you're showing competence. When that happens, you get to comfort. The artist begins to relax. Okay, this person isn't going to do a hatchet job on me, knows what they're talking about, so I can maybe not have my guard up. And when they get comfortable, they start to trust you. That's step 4. And when you get to trust, they will tell you anything. So what you have to do over the course of a very few minutes is get through all 4 steps so that they're immediately comfortable and willing to trust you so they can tell you stuff. And it's easier with some artists and not so easy with others, but you always have to go through that process. There is no shortcut to this. Now, there are artists who you don't have to do anything for. Bono is a great example. I've interviewed Bono a whole bunch of times, and they all go the same way. He sits down across from you. He stares you in the eye, making you think that you're the only person in the world that matters. And your first question to him is, hey, Bono, how's it going? And that's it for the next 45 minutes. Because the man talks and talks. And he talks, in these wonderful florid phrases, these wonderful choices of words. He's got the soul of an Irish poet. He's fantastic and so much charisma that he makes you believe. He's so in the moment. He makes you think that you're the only person in the world that really matters. There has never been a case where I've talked to Bono and our time is up and somebody has come in, grabbed him by the arm and dragged him out the door where he hasn't continued to talk as he's being dragged out. The only other person with that level of charisma that I ever talked to was David Bowie. And I'm going to confess a David Bowie story here. This is 1990. Before Ongoing History began, I was given an opportunity to interview him when he was going through his Tin Machine years. I got 30 minutes with David Bowie. 30 minutes, me and him alone, face to face, this far apart. And I don't remember what I asked him. I don't remember what he said because I was just like, this is Bowie. This is Ziggy Stardust. It's Aladdin Sane. It's Thin White Duke. It's he's the Let's Dance guy. He's boom, I could punch him in the face. I'd be punching David Bowie in the face, and maybe I could make his other guy go crazy. Now, these are the things that are going through my mind. And so anyway, he again in the moment, staring me in the eye, answering my questions, whatever they were. Our 30 minutes was up. He signed my album and he left. And then I looked down, and I'd forgotten to unpause my tape machine.
Oh no!
Yeah. Years later, I meet him one more time. And I said, David, can I have a word? And I tell him the story. And he's listening intently. And he puts his hands on my shoulders and stares me in the eye and says, well, That was stupid of you, wasn't it? And that was the last words he spoke to me.
That was going to be
so
my
that explains
question.
why we could never find that tape that I heard. Okay.
It was, I pulled it out of the cassette machine in my car and threw it on the 401 somewhere around Keel.
Could you somehow magically just blame Rob for that?
I can't.
I know.
Can't.
That was going to be my question about the ongoing history of lost tapes. Are there any besides David Bowie that you're just like, man, oh man?
Rob, do we have any lost tapes, or have we managed to save most of them?
Knock on wood. I will say, Is this work? Okay. I will say, it has been my greatest fear, is not pushing record on something. Yeah. But I can't honestly think of any.
No, I after the Bowie thing, they never trusted me with my own.
And we are recording.
We are. This is being recorded, right? Okay. Good.
We're going to have an opportunity for, if anybody out there, or anybody here has any questions they want to have, please raise your hand at any time.
Let me check the script here, John.
Okay.
The script says Q&A session with Shauna, Ryan, and Johnny. So when you're tired, tell me, and I will throw to the next commercial break. Again, this is how radio works.
I have an extremely personal question. Is like, I remember September 25th, 1991, walking into Meadowvale High School, and my entire musical landscape changed because of what happened the day before with the drop of Nevermind. I've been on Q107 since 06, and I've never had the opportunity to drop the needle, if you will, on a music-changing record or a music-changing song. I know you talked about the death of Kurt Cobain, but what was it like for the first time you played it? Okay,
here's what happened. This was a Tuesday. It was August the 27th, 1991, the day the CD single came out. And Ivor Hamilton, who used to work at the radio station, had moved on to Polygram Records, came into the studio, and he had this CD single. He says, put this on. So, okay, we at that point still could choose our own music. It was 11:38 in the morning. Again, this is, because it's such a big deal. It's 11:38 in the morning. I put it on, and Smells Like Teen Spirit starts. I think I'm the first person in Canada to play the song. I think. Put it on, and the phone immediately started to ring. And this is when request lines would melt down. And people, what is this? What is this? What are you playing? What is this? What is this? And we had to play it again and again and again for the rest of the day because people were losing their minds over it. The following, on Thursday, so this was Tuesday, on Thursday we had a promo copy of the CD single. We play the CD single at the Kingdom in Burlington. It might have been called Energy at the time, I can't remember. But we played it on the Thursday night for an alternative dance night. Everybody knew all the words already. It was absolutely stunning, the impact that had. So that record, the single comes out August 27th, 1991, same day as 10 by Pearl Jam. The album comes out the 24th of September, the same day as Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Chili Peppers. And within, Sub Pop and Warner thought, or DGC thought this was going to sell 50,000, maybe 100,000 copies. Within a couple of weeks, it was selling 300,000 copies a week. And then in January, it knocks Michael Jackson off the #1 slot on the Billboard album charts. And at that point, working at this underdog alternative station, it was like, okay, our time has arrived. We're #1. And it was a wild ride. Between 91 and 95 was my favorite era of music because every day you come into work and there'd be this new sound, this new song, this new scene that we never heard of. I mean, you think about it, that's Manchester, that's grunge, that's American indie, that's the entire Lollapalooza generation was gangster rap. It was everything happening in that period, and it was just the early part of Britpop. It was just amazing.
You just reminded me. You said something many, many, many years ago that stuck with me. That's the kind of influence you are and the broadcaster you are. That you said along the lines of, whatever era, like you're in high school, college, that window will always be to you the greatest genre of music. And so, Johnny and I went to high school together, and in that window between like 1989 and 1994, we had to take an extra year to just make everything work. And it's a huge part of our life. And that means you're such a huge part of our life because you taught us everything we know about that type of music.
Well, if you look around, you'll see people of similar ages. Every generation has a biological right to believe the music of their youth is the greatest music of all time, which is kind of frightening because 40 years from now, somebody's going to go, oh, Drake, he was the best. Tay-Tay. But it's true. And it's if you grew up in the 90s, if you were between 14 and 24 in the 90s, that will be your music for the rest of your life. It is going to be your comfort food forever.
But speaking of that, like I have a son who's 15. What do you think about the future? I know it's the history, but what are you nervous? Do you think AI is going to change things for the worse, for the better?
Well, there's going to be an AI version of Ongoing History in the new year. So I'll explain that in detail then. But I can tell you right now that the dominant form of music in the world is not rock anymore. It is hip hop, which is fine. Rock's been around since the early 1950s. Hip hop is coming close to maturing itself. So there's going to be a time in the not too distant future when something else comes along to reinvigorate the popular music scene. I don't know what that's going to be. It could be rock, could be hip hop, could be something completely different. But what's happened now is that streaming has made 120 million songs accessible to anybody with a few pokes on their phone. That means a 15-year-old has access to the entire library of recorded human musical history. So your 15-year-old, I bet you, is listening to contemporary stuff from the 90s, stuff from the 70s, stuff from the 60s. So your kid is absorbing far more music to influence him in his musical development than we ever did, because we were only focused largely on what was happening to us as contemporaries, whatever the hot music was at the time. Today's kids are listening to the music of all time. I did a teaching thing at Humber College a while ago, and I would ask everybody to tell me the last 10 songs that they played on their phones. And it would be, Drake, Doja Cat, Justin Bieber, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Beatles, Drake, whatever. Like they're so ecumenical in their taste. Somebody was saying, some 21-year-old was saying, a guy. I'm recently into the music of Billie Holiday. It's like, what? She died in 1959. He goes, yeah, I know, but I discarded and I'm into Billie Holiday right now. So somewhere right now there's a 15-year-old, maybe it's your son. There's a 15-year-old who is absorbing all this music and taking in all these influences and will one day make music of his or her or their own. And they're going to change the world in a way that we can't even comprehend because we're old and set in our ways. And that's just the way it is. Music is always, always driven by youth, and music is always downstream from society. So whatever is happening in society, we'll get into music because of youth.
I'll say this. Sean and I have sons that play hockey that are quite young, and the rock and roll is by far the number one genre in the rinks.
I will tell you that the United States is the biggest the biggest music market in the world. So we tend to believe whatever comes out of the U.S. If you were to look at Canada and Canada alone and take into account things like concert ticket sales, rock is by far and away the number one genre in Canada, followed by pop, followed by hip hop and R&B, which they put together for some reason. So rock is definitely still dominant for Canadians. But if you look at the world and what's driving culture, it's largely hip hop. But rock is not dead. Not even close. Not even close. If you go to, I just got back from Scotland, and walking through the streets of Edinburgh, just rock everywhere.
We're gonna throw it to the.
No, not yet.
No, not yet.
No, we got to do a commercial break.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any more? You done? Good. Okay. So
Good.
it's my show. God damn it. All right. So here we go. Well, thank you for the interrogation. I appreciate it. We'll be back with more questions, this time from the audience, right after this.
Hey, Alan, it's Kiefer Sutherland here. I just wanted to take a moment and congratulate you on the ongoing history of new music.
Hey, I'm Gavin from Bush. Want to say big congratulations to Alan Cross and his ongoing history of new music.
And your 1,000th episode.
1,000 episodes.
Good for you, man.
I hope I'm in loads more to come.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do now is anybody who has a question about anything to do with the show, please raise your hand and I'll do my best. So we are at 8 o'clock. We got about half an hour to go through this, okay? All right, so here's the first question.
Hold on.
Wait.
You have to come back for the break.
See, this is why I need...
You could do it from there.
No, here we go. So I got my script. You'd think I wrote the script. You'd think I know. If we were going to do a 1,000th ongoing history special, it made sense to invite some friends to watch all this happen. And they've all joined us here in Toronto at Corus Quay on the 8th floor, our theater here. And apparently, some people have some questions. So we are going to open it up to the audience. Do your worst.
Alan, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Second of all, you've talked about all these amazing artists that you've interviewed, and I'm sure you've looked forward to a lot of them. Have any of those interviews with an artist that you really looked forward to ended up not going so well at the end of the day?
Oddly, no. My experience has been that the bigger the artist, the better they are at interviews, simply because they know that talking to journalists is part of their gig, and they need to be respectful of the process and the industry. So no, I mean, have I had some bad interviews? Yeah. I mean, the worst interview I think I ever had was pre-ongoing history. Anybody remember the Beautiful South? Okay. So they were delivered directly to the radio station from the airport. And we used to have these things called CFNY live mics, which meant when a record rep brought around a band, we dropped everything and put them immediately on the air for a live interview. So this was the case with the Beautiful South. They were tired from a transatlantic flight. They were a bit drunk, and they were angry that they were missing an important football match to be dragged around to a bunch of radio stations, including one in a rundown strip mall somewhere outside of Toronto. And they all piled into the station. I was the one on the air. So we went into the studio, they came into the studio, and they sat in the perimeter of the studio, nobody closer than 6 feet from a microphone. I'd ask them a question, and I'd get an answer like, oh, silence. They looked at each other. It was a terrible interview, and this is live, right? So it lasted about 90 seconds. Thanks for not coming, or thanks for coming and not talking, is I think what I said. So it was a terrible one. There were a couple of interviews where I probably kind of screwed up. Another live mic situation. This is 1988. And for some reason, IRS Records had decided to launch or relaunch Leonard Cohen's career as an alternative artist. And he had this album called I'm Your Man. And Leonard Cohen was brought into the studio, 55 years old. I'm on the air. I haven't got a clue who Leonard Cohen is, other than he was some guy from the 60s. I had no idea that he was a respected writer and poet and songwriter, and that people studied his work at university at the PhD level. I had no idea. So he comes into the studio, and I'm supposed to come up with some questions on the spot. Again, pre-internet, pre-everything. There was maybe a press release that I had to scan and ask questions from, but I didn't know anything about his background. So the proprietary and the propriety and the competence were not in effect that day. So he comes in, and he's all dressed in black hair, black sunglasses, black clothes, black shoes, and he's smoking these terrible Gatane cigarettes, these French cigarettes that stunk. And you could smoke in the studio back in those days. So the light goes on. Hey, I'm Alan Cross. We're here with another live mic, and today my guest is Leonard Cohen. Silence. Okay, I'm thinking, he's a little stiff. I'm going to have to loosen him up a little bit. So I look at him. Welcome, CFNY. Thank you. Would you mind if I called you Lenny? Silence. And then he takes a big drag of his cigarette, blows the smoke in my face, and leans into the microphone, and in his best Leonard Cohen voice goes, "Don't." So that interview was short and did not go well. And that was my fault. Okay, wait, here we go.
Congratulations, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
This dude, by the way, came all the way from Vancouver for this show.
Thanks, Thank you, everybody. It was my pleasure. So trying to pick my favorite of your episodes, listening to you for 20 plus years, has always been difficult because it's a moving goalpost. Every week I tend to find that's my favorite episode. But the ones that always resonated most with me are the ones that you can really hear the heart and where it's really, you can tell it's been really impactful to you. My latest favorite is the Remembering Sinead O'Connor. Can you think of a couple of episodes that really, when you hear them today, they sit as powerfully with you today as they did when you did them?
Most of them do, because I put my heart and soul into every script. And none of the emotion that you may hear in my voice is faked. I mean, it's all very, very real. I get to choose the topics. I get to choose the angle of the story. And, you know, the whole idea, like I said earlier, is maximum emotional impact and the minimum number of words. So, yeah, the Sinead O'Connor one was tough because I've been following her career. I met her for the first time in 1987 when she was 19, this little girl who came into the studio, but you could tell that you did not want to mess with her. I liked doing the Tool one because I'm fascinated by the mystery of that is Tool. You know, anything to do with Gord Downey is always interesting because the man was so deep and enigmatic. I mean, I asked him once, what does this song mean? And his answer to all those questions were, what does it mean to you? Well, thanks, Gord, but I didn't write the song. No, that's the point. I write the song. It's up to you to interpret it. Dave Grohl is always a real fun guy to interview. Noel Gallagher is just how you want Noel Gallagher to be. He's a, you know, I'm a big Britpop fan, and any, you know, the stories that he has. And Liam Gallagher is a jerk, just like you want him to be, because the last thing you want is to interview Liam Gallagher and he's polite to you. That's not what you want. But then there are other cases. We'll go back to this whole interview thing that's kind of off topic. But like I said, the bigger the interview subject, the better that they seem to treat you. Gord Downey once showed up to an interview early and he said, that's not a problem. I'll just go to Starbucks. Do you want anything? And I said, yeah, I'll take a latte. Okay, I'll be back in a moment. And he goes out and did I just send Gord Downey out to Starbucks for me? Early on, this is early 80s, Angus Young of AC/DC made me a cup of tea. And about 15 years ago, John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin offered to make me tea while I was getting ready for an interview. So again, the bigger the artist, the better that they tend to be. What was your question? Oh, which shows, okay. So anything where there's a personal connection with the artist allows me to really dig into it, because I see the other thing too is that I've been around long enough, I've been doing this long enough that I was there. I actually participated. I was involved in the scene. I was there when Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails played Toronto for the first time, or I was there when the Pixies, almost tore down the old concert hall, or I remember having to try to introduce Shane MacGowan and the Pogues, but they couldn't find him because he was out drinking someplace. And when they found him, they hustled him right up to the stage before he passed out. I never got to introduce the band because they wanted to get Shane in front of a mic as quickly as they possibly could. I got to within 15 feet of him and I could smell him. I really could. But it was amazing. He got to the microphone, he knew all the words, and it was just like, it's wild. So I'm going to have to do something on Shane in the new year, because the Pogues were so important when it comes to bringing that Irish Celtic folk tradition into punk rock. And there's a great story there, a really great story. Yeah. Now I'm again making a list for 2024. I've got things written to somewhere in mid-February. So starting tomorrow, start working on those.
But as we say, it's not set in stone because, well, things like Shane happen.
Yeah. Somebody will die. And then that is, see, I'm Mr. Obituary. When anybody dies, every single news network in Canada calls me for a comment. So the last big one was I did a whole bunch of I'll do. Jimmy Buffett was a big one. Gordon Lightfoot was a big one. The Gord Downie one was the worst. Corus actually had to send somebody to my house where I was doing all the interviews and sit on the couch in my office, coordinating all the phone calls that were coming in. Yeah. So anytime, you probably have noticed, if you turn on CBC News Network, CB24, CTV News Channel, CBC National News, CTV National News, occasionally Fox, occasionally CNN, and more often than not, well, certainly before Hamas invaded, there's an all-news station in Israel, in Tel Aviv, that would call me for stuff. So, yeah, I'm Mr. Obituary. Sorry about that.
I think one of the things about, unfortunately, when these things happen, though, is it gives us the opportunity to do the What's the Big Deal About series. Because how do you conceptualize Sinead O'Connor or Shane MacGowan on their own? But now we can package it better, I guess, is a way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, they may be familiar to some of us who have followed them through 20, 30, 40 years of their career. But then there's all these other people who have no idea who this person is. Why is somebody making such a big deal about somebody's death? Well, let me explain that to you. And it's really important, I think. One question that I'm going to ask is, why hasn't anybody asked about the Ongoing History theme song?
Alan?
Yes?
What's the deal with the Ongoing History of New Music theme song?
Well, in 1993, when I was assigned this stupid program against my will, the radio station also hired a imaging producer, which is a fancy word for somebody who does jingles and commercials and all kinds of that in-between song stuff that you hear. His name was Amin Batia. And Amin came up with this. Well, let's get him in to tell the story himself, shall we? No, you're not getting out of this. You showed up, so you get to... Oh, way to go. Okay, so, yeah. So Amin is well, you explain what you do, Amin.
I'd never heard imaging producer. That's pretty cool.
Oh, you've never heard that?
No, I didn't know that. Stu never gave me that title, so that I much prefer it. Thank you.
Okay.
I was in between doing synthesizer music and producing tape. I lived between radio and film, and when the CFNY gig came along, it was a chance to try all kinds of combinations. The theme song is a combo of me doing stuff on my synthesizers, some production library stuff, some sound effects. The opening is just a DAT tape scrubbing backwards through a whole bunch of stuff because ongoing history, just a rewind through time kind of thing. And the big guitar ending at the end is actually me on a Roland S760 sampler. The beautiful female voice thing that slides by, we have no idea where that's from. We keep trying to find. There were so many production libraries back then. And we also had a blanket license in those days. You could, as long as it was a Canadian band, you could use some of that stuff in your productions. Input 102 was all me. I remember that, creating the bed for all of that stuff. But that female slide by, we're still stunned by where it went, and we're thrilled it turned out to be what it is. But like yourself, we put the thing together very quickly. Okay, ongoing history, something to do with time. Okay, great, and done. And who knew 1,000 times later it would be here.
It's 1,000 plus the 7,000. The 7,000 daily features plus the 21 million podcasts. The interesting thing, too, about that is people have asked me, where's the full song? And there is no full song. It's that, how long is the raw bed?
Well, what's the podcast version? Because you've got this cool kind of, you loop it. But where's the original stuff from? Yes, thanks, Rob. But where's that originally from? So that's from the previous recording, and then you cut it up and did some stuff? Craig?
I don't know a whole lot of anything anymore. It's been a long, long time. I do remember that when Alan and I got teamed together to do this, we talked a little bit about the idea. And like Alan has said, he had no idea what the show was going to be. And then he invited my wife and I up to your house, if you remember.
Yes.
It was like a Saturday. I thought, okay, we're going to talk about the ongoing history of new music. But no, we talked about satellite TV because Alan and his wife had just installed one.
A 12-foot dish in the backyard.
To the tune of about $5,000. So you could watch Roseanne fed live.
Because we didn't have cable.
No, because you were up in, I guess, Orangeville, and I was in Caledon.
In a place called Waldemar, which is a little tiny place west of Orangeville near Grand Valley.
That's right.
No cable, and we couldn't even get over-the-air TV up there.
That's right. So we came up and watched your satellite, and then you convinced me and my wife to put one in. So whatever money we had, the $5,000 we had in our bank account went into a satellite TV. Thanks for the financial advice, Alan.
You're welcome. That's what I do.
Yeah. You're great at radio, not so great at finances.
No.
Anyhow, yeah, I have no idea. I mean, we did like 100 shows, and I don't know.
110.
Is that what I did with you, 110?
Yep.
All right. And Rob reminds me all the time that they sound like shit, so thank you for that.
I just say it requires a lot of process, because back then we didn't have any processors. Okay, so Alan alluded to this earlier. When the show was first produced, Alan would finish his show Wednesday. It was always a Wednesday. He would come into the studio at 83 Kennedy Road South. Craig would work on those nights, or I was working, come up with the script, and we record him on a 1/4-inch tape, which we have over here. These are 1/4-inch tapes. So you'd record onto these. That would take 30 to 45 minutes of Alan doing what he did here. And then Craig and I would get out a razor blade and tape and a grease pencil, and we would edit the voice track down in real time. So take the 45 minutes to record that, take the double the time to do the edit, and then we would lay that down on a multi-track tape in real time. We'd lay the music in real time. We'd mix it all down to 2-track tape to play back on the radio in real time. So that's how it was for first 250 shows until we moved out of Brampton and went digital.
Yeah, and it was a lot of work. Now I have a studio at home. I have Pro Tools. I record my voice track into Pro Tools. I upload it to Dropbox. Rob downloads it, edits it while watching TV on a laptop.
Yeah.
And then
I've been known to edit it on a plane at 35,000 feet.
Yeah, it's been done. And I either supply music, or he's already. How many songs have I supplied you over the years?
Many hard drives full.
Many, yeah.
So what we do though is once that's done, so you hear that air on the Saturday or Sunday, depending on where you're listening to it. And then on the Wednesday, the podcast version comes out. And we started those 2017, 2018. And what we do with those is we telescope them down. A lot of people ask, why can't we play the full song on the podcast? And that gets all into the whole world of copyright and rights management. And that's just the bridge we can't even figure out.
No.
So we telescope it down to the 15 seconds and put it into the show, because the story has always been.
Would we love to play full songs? Absolutely we would, but there is no mechanism anywhere on the planet that would allow us to pay for the permission to put songs in podcasts. It does not exist. So,
but we've found that the podcast has given the show a longevity that I don't think we'd ever have.
No, which, and I'll give a plug for this now, which is why we've launched a new podcast, which is called Uncharted. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But and man, the idea of back in the day doing 2 shows a week with the tape that we had and the technology we had, no. But now we do 3 shows every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We
used to do 48 shows a year.
We did. And now it's 33 or 34, depending on the calendar.
Because we smartened up.
We did. And we realized that, with people who are listening on the radio, the best time for them is coming home from the cottage on Sunday night. So there's all these shows that they never heard during the year because they were, taking kids to hockey practice or watching 60 Minutes or something. And they hear the shows for the first time over those 13 weeks in the summertime for the first time. So that's helped. Starting this week, Corus AM radio stations across the country are going to start running the program overnight. There is a station in the UK that runs nothing but podcasts, and we're part of that. And what else is there? That's about it for the moment. But there's more stuff coming.
We try to evolve as things evolve.
Yeah,
the funny thing. Remember, I told you I found that podcast that we did in 2007.
Yeah.
We tried. We attempted to do podcasting back then, and it just never gained traction.
No, because if we put out a podcast, well, that'll cannibalize our radio listening.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do that. And we could have been doing this podcast in 2007, but there just wasn't a need, there wasn't a market for it. Now, we've had an inside look on how the ongoing history of new music comes together. Back in a moment with more of the 1000th episode of the ongoing history of new music recorded live at Corus Quay in Toronto.
Hey, this is Max.
And this is Nick from Arkells.
Hello, Alan Cross. It's Dan Mangan.
Hey, it's Reeve.
Sean.
And Nick from Beach Weather.
Congratulations to the one and only Alan Cross for 1,000 episodes of the ongoing history of new music. Woo! Jeez, it's an incredible accomplishment.
A lot of episodes.
You, my friend, are a legend.
I'm Alan Cross, and this is a special edition podcast of the ongoing history of new music, where we take you inside the full Q&A session from the live recording of the 1000th episode back on December the 5th. Okay, now let me take you back to Corus Quay.
Alan, congratulations again on the episode.
Thank you.
Your comment about Britpop.
Yes.
I remember you bridging the 80s and 90s and alternative bands. Do you have any best memory where you think you got something right and you were on the vanguard of introducing it to Canadians? I'm thinking, in the era of Cure and all those kind of bands where you were the soundbite on Sunday night and you just saw it took off for the balance of the week or the month.
It's hard to say, but because especially before the internet took off in 1996, like I said, radio was your source of real-time information. And we would be fed stuff by record labels, or we would have somebody like Lee Carter over in the UK feeding us the latest information before, weeks before those music magazines would show up in Canadian stores. So we would be several weeks ahead of what's going on. I remember reading about the Happy Mondays and thinking, okay, this band is going to be something along with the Stone Roses and the Charlatans. And, there were some of us at the radio station that really got behind that music in that era. And we, in that particular case, as far as that music is concerned, I think we led the culture in Toronto for sure, certainly in Ontario, certainly in Western New York, and maybe beyond. We did very well promoting British music because Toronto is like the third leg of a triangle that extends through New York and London. And a lot of British acts used to break into America by using Toronto as a staging ground. So you can name any British band from 1980 forward, and they will credit the radio station for having helped break them in North America. I was at dropping a name. I was at Peter Hook's house earlier this year. We are doing a documentary, a film documentary on the Spirit of Radio CFNY years. So that would be 1977 to 1992. And we're in the final editing stages right now. And earlier this year, we went to London, Glasgow, Manchester, and Liverpool, talking to people like Jim Kerr of Simple Minds, Peter Hook. We had a whole afternoon working at Abbey Road Studios. We've also been to Vancouver and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Las Vegas and a couple of other places. So this documentary is going to be pretty good. And one of the things in the documentary that we explore is the music that the radio station brought to the masses and how that affected the overall growth of alternative music in North America. So it's coming. Yeah. Who else? Yes.
Hi, Alan. Congratulations. You talk about a number of subjects throughout the 1,000 episodes over the past 30 years, no matter what genre, no matter what sound. Is there a subject that you would never touch with a 10-foot pole?
It gets tricky. What do you do about Me Too cases? The music industry is having a reckoning finally when it comes to Me Too stuff. So how do you tackle those cases in which there are allegations made, but no conviction in court? So I'm not going to touch that. It's just asking for trouble, and they're asking for, possible legal ramifications if you say the wrong thing. Not going to touch it. Just leave that's not my job to adjudicate those cases. Yes.
Always a pleasure to see you, Alan, especially in this circumstance. This is great. So congratulations, obviously. That's a really tough question to follow up. That was an excellent question and reply. I wanted to quickly ask, I was wondering if you could talk about the influence of the bootlegging that happened in the 90s for especially your show, because you had mentioned a little bit about how like Western New York and everything. So I'm kind of asking on behalf of a coworker of mine who wanted to mention specific episodes that he would tape off the radio and became integral parts of, his listening whole experience. But I know that in the US, especially markets that, you weren't necessarily in, there was a lot of bootlegging that was going on. So I was wondering if you could speak
are we
to
talking
that
about bootlegging of the show or
bootlegging of the show? Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
Well, my sister was living in Chicago for a while, and she went into an independent record store, and they had a whole bunch of cassettes under the counter that were my shows taped off the radio somewhere, and they were selling them for $40 a piece. So, okay. And I remember once, remember Eden Fest? It was a one-time only ill-fated music festival at Mossport. Somebody came in with a shortwave radio and said, listen to this. And somebody somewhere in the world was broadcasting the show over shortwave. So, okay, that's cool. So yeah, it has been bootlegged. It continues to be bootlegged. There's a lot of torrent sites out there with that have been populated by these shows. Go with God. There's nothing we can do about it. Just nothing we can do about it. It's just there. So yes.
Hi, Alan.
Where'd you go? There you are.
Hi. I just had a question about like the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed, or I guess kind of pertaining to like how you grew up and getting into music. Like, is that something that you grew up listening to, or is it something discovered as a radio DJ later on?
Okay. I grew up in a small town outside of Winnipeg. Everything was top 40 radio until 1978. In 1978, we finally got an album rock station. So I became an album rock head. So Deep Purple, Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, all that stuff. I was a dazed and confused rock guy who played in a metal trio. I was the drummer, and I had a Neil Peart-sized drum kit.
Nice.
And we'd play, Van Halen versions of You Really Got Me and stuff like that. So I'll tell you a quick story there. The bass player in that band was my buddy Charlie. And Charlie had terrible stage fright. He was also the singer. So he would always start the night with a couple of triple rum and cokes. And Charlie was also in charge of writing down all the lyrics because, of course, he was going to sing the song. So one day before a show, I'm going through this notebook that he always had laid out in front of him to help remind him of what he was supposed to sing. And there's You Really Got Me. So I'm reading the lyrics of You Really Got Me. It says, girl, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, good. Girl, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what you weigh. And he'd been singing that for I don't know how many gigs. But that was my thing. And in 1983, I got a job at a radio station in Brandon, Manitoba, which was far cooler than it really had a right to be. It was called KX96. And they were not only playing, the standard rock stuff of the day, but there'd be Aztec Camera. There would be the Jam. There would be the Clash. It's like, it's a really eclectic mix of music. So that's where I learned a little bit about, the English beat and the Specials and a few other artists that we played. And then I ended up in Winnipeg at a terrible alternative adult contemporary station that doesn't exist anymore. And it was not where I wanted to be. So one night I had a fight with my boss, and I made a demo tape to try and get a job either in Edmonton or Vancouver. And as I was dubbing off the final tape, I noticed a magazine on the console. And of course, I'm doing this at 2:00 in the morning using station facilities to find another job. Then they had an ad for a radio station in Brampton. And it was CFNY. And I had heard about CFNY because I'd seen the Casbys, and I'd heard about the Unos before that. And I'd bought Permanent Ways from Rush in 1980, and the song The Spirit of Radio was on there. And it was a dedication in the lyrics to the radio station. So I thought, okay, well, I'll dub off one more cassette and send it off. And I ended up getting the job 5 days later. And then I made the move. And I remember going into the studio and after, I knew none of this music. I had, the Smiths, what's a Smith? Depeche Mode, and the only song I knew was People Are People, because that was the only top 40 song across Canada. Knew very little about, didn't know who New Order was, couldn't understand why they were such a big deal. But after about a week of being able to go through the entire library, the thought was, where has this music been all my life? Why has this been hidden from me? Why didn't I know about this? And from then, and of course, the rest of the staff, everybody was just like hardcore music heads. And we were on a mission from God. I mean, I tell you that when I was working 6 days a week, 5 of them overnights, one Saturday morning for $17,500 a year. But we all believed that we were on a mission from God and that we were going to teach the world about great music. And that was our attitude, which will come out in the documentary when you hear about it. So that's where I made the conversion from a mullet head rock head to an alternative kid and haven't really looked back. Yeah. Oh, Ivor, hello.
Hi, Alan. Nice to see you.
Ivor is the guy that walked Smells Like Teen Spirit into the office.
And brought Beautiful South into the station.
That's
too.
right. It was you.
And I was also the guy who was running publicity for David Bowie, and I should have told you to press the button down. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yes.
After all these years, is there anybody that you're still chasing to get an interview for the program? Is there anybody who eludes you?
Rolling Stones. I mean, I would have even talked to Charlie, but that's off the table now. Yeah, nobody from the Rolling Stones, and I've missed by a hair somebody from Pink Floyd, just because or Elton John. I mean, just bucket list stuff. Those are the ones that I've. And you haven't been any help.
I tried.
Yeah, I know. Now it's too late.
Stones in Vancouver. We'll try help you with that.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go to see the Stones in Vancouver.
Hi, Alan.
Hi.
Congratulations on the milestone. So my question is, in days before the internet,
oh God,
how did you source such detailed, incredible information about artists and these stories?
Well, if you go back and listen to those shows from the days before the internet, you'll see that they're not that good. Well, what we would do is, I would go and at one point I was buying, and because I was an independent contractor, as you'll recall, I didn't get to expense anything. So I was buying $3,000 worth of magazines every year. So that's where a lot of it came from. And then there were 2 filing cabinets at the radio station filled with press clippings and press releases from record labels. And they were all alphabetized by act. And we would, at some point, somebody like Scott Turner would have, clipped something out and filed it away for future reference because that was our library. That's where we got the information from. I still have those cabinets in my basement, by the way. I kind of stole them, but nobody wanted them. Okay, another story. 1996, the radio station finally moves from 83 Kennedy Road South, this terrible strip mall that was infested with roaches and rats. In the strip mall, there were three different roti shops. You couldn't plug in the kettle and run the microwave at the same time because you would take the station off the air. And there was no security whatsoever. So if somebody decided to have a party with some friends in on the weekend when there was no supervision, you know where I'm going with this, right? So we would come in Monday morning and we would come again, and we come in Monday morning and the microwave would be missing. Where'd it go? Headley had another party and I guess something happened. So anyway, so at that time, if you remember, nobody wanted anything to do with vinyl. Vinyl was old, dusty, moldy, crackly, popply. It was terrible stuff. And the thinking was 1996, the internet was on the ascendant. Well, there's no need to keep all this vinyl because in a couple of years, all the music in the world will be available online and we'll just download it. At the time, that was science fiction. It was never going to happen. Of course, it did. But we're not going to bother moving all this vinyl from Brampton to downtown Toronto. We're just going to throw it out. So the staff heard about this And over the next few weeks leading up to the move, records started disappearing. Weirdest thing. Did you notice any? No. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I'll tell you what happened. The day that the station completed its move, I hired a Ryder truck. And I backed up the truck to the radio station and I took the library home. So if you grew up listening to CFNY between 1977 and 1996, and remember people like Chris Shepard playing records on Saturday night, those actual records are in my basement with Chris Shepard's writing on it, with my writing on it, with Pete and Geets writing on it, with James Scott writing, with May Potts, Scott Turner, everybody. I have those records in my basement and they're staying there until, okay, this is the Ivor story. We have it in each other's will that the first guy who goes gets the other guy's records. And if you've ever been to Ivor's house, you'll understand why my wife wants me to die first. Okay, let's do a couple more here, and then we can. Oh,
Mike,
wait, right
hello.
here.
Turn on, Mike. So my question, because you've kind of alluded to it, I'm kind of curious to see the documentary when it comes out. Really looking forward to that. But state of alternative today, state of alternative in the heydays of the 80s and 90s and spirit of radio. What's your opinion? What's your context? Where do you think we're at?
Well, see, back then, there were 5 major cultural gatekeepers. There were radio stations, record stores, record labels, music magazines, and I guess after a while, video channels. Those were the things that determined the music that we listened to. And we were, there was a scarcity of music. We only got to hear what we were allowed to hear based on those cultural gatekeepers. And that spawned a situation where bands could get very, very big and they would become very socially important. Because there was always a center to music. There was always something that you could coalesce around. There was always consensus. For example, when I was in high school, grade 10, 30 people in the class, 5 of them were pop music fans, 5 of them were country music fans, and the remaining 20 were Kiss fans. Because you turn on the radio and the guy on the radio said that Kiss was the greatest band of all time. You went to the record store and what was all racked up front? Nothing but Kiss records. You went down to the drugstore and you bought copies of Cream and Circus magazine. Who was on the cover? It was Kiss. So we had all this consensus. And there was, back in the day, there was a certain ubiquity to this music because if we only had so much to listen to, everybody listened to it. Today, it's completely different. I can't name you. Taylor Swift is huge, absolutely huge, but she is not as huge as bands used to be back in the day. I can't, she's got her fans and she's playing, 50, 60,000 people a night. But you compare that to, what the Rolling Stones used to do and what Led Zeppelin used to do and all these other bands back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And it pales by comparison. I mean, we all know the lyrics to Satisfaction. We all know the lyrics to Smells Like Teen Spirit. I can't tell you any, the only 3 lyrics I know from Taylor Swift are Shake It Off. That's it. So she's huge, but she's not as huge compared to what huge used to be. So alternative music has become, again, more of a niche thing than it used to be. It was niche, then it became the mainstream, and then now it's just part of this giant panoply of music that everybody can listen to for free. So it's the good music is there. It's just that there's so much of it. It takes a lot longer to find stuff that's going to make you excited like you were back in the day. Now, again, between 14 and 24, music was a really important thing to you. You had lots of time, enough money, and enough energy to pursue it almost full time. Plus, you used music to figure out who you were as a human being. And then once you began to figure that out, you used that same music to project your identity to the rest of the world. I'm a punk kid. I'm a metal kid. I'm a goth kid, whatever it is. So this is another reason why that music will be so important to you, because it's a part of your growing up, a part of your identity. Today, like I said, there's all we have is all these things that come together and break up, come together, break up. There's no ubiquity anymore. So where's alternative today? It's there. You just got to look for it. And the other problem too is, we talk about baggage and bias and prejudice and experience. You get to a certain age, you've experienced an awful lot of music in your life. You know what you like, you know what you don't like. You're pretty hardcore in your habits and your wants and your needs and your wishes. And because you have so much experience, there's very little stuff that it's kind of like being a heroin addict. And, the first taste, you just need a tiny little bit and you get this huge high and you want more. But every time you shoot up, you need more to get that same high. And then eventually you are just shooting up to stay alive and you don't get any sort of, high from it at all. That's like being a music fan. By the time you're in your 40s or 45, 46 up there, you've heard an awful lot of music and you'll do one of two things. You'll go back to the music of your youth and listen to that over and over and over again for the rest of your life. Or you will go back to the era of when you were 14 to 24 and you'll start investigating bands that you missed the first time around. So, I found myself doing this. I got into a Spaceman 3 kick for a while. Who's Spaceman 3? Again, it's just somebody that I discovered that I had missed in 1985. So that's the situation. If you find yourself getting bogged down, try listening to radio stations online or radio stations in other parts of the world, because they have a completely different viewpoint of what music is and what should be pushed. So do that. And the other thing is, what else can you do? Don't rely on the algorithm if you're streaming, because the algorithm only gives you more of what you've already listened to, and you end up being in a bubble and never really, explore beyond that bubble. Or see live music. If you have the energy and the time, do it. It's just gets harder with life and kids and mortgages and jobs and all that sort of stuff. Let's do one more.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Controversial topic that's come up for you over time. Something that drew the ire of your listeners that maybe at the time you didn't understand, but just got a bunch of backlash or feedback that was polarizing.
Yeah, in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have done the Kurt Cobain was murdered thing, because that turned out to be a bunch of conspiratorial garbage. Oddly enough, I became friends with Courtney Love, and I've spent a lot of time with her, and there's no way. There's just no way. She had not a chance. I've never asked her about it, but having spent time with it, there's no way in hell. I shouldn't have done that. Now, we do have this other podcast, which, would that be a true crime topic? Yeah, but probably from the point of view is that it was a conspiracy and all trumped up.
Thanks, Alan.
And that is what it sounded like at Corus Quay for the 1000th episode of the Ongoing History of New Music, which, as you heard, was done before a live audience. Be sure to go back to last week's podcast and hear the full radio show version that outlines how we got here, as well as some highlight show clips from over the years. Thanks to Shauna, Ryan, and Johnny for hosting. And make sure to check out their podcast called Bad Parents, which is about, bad parents. It's available every Wednesday. Thanks to the live audience for participating and asking some great questions. We'll definitely have to do this again. And thanks to Lisa, Rick, Michael, Chris, Harrison, and everybody else who helped out with the 1000th episode event. Be sure to check out the other podcast that I'm doing these days. It's called Uncharted: Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry. This is a true crime podcast that debuted back in October of 2023, and it covers crime, murder, robberies, weird deaths, disappearances, the mob, and a ton of other instances where music intersects with crime and baddies. You can get Uncharted wherever you get your podcasts, and episodes come out every 2 weeks. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on all the social media platforms. I always answer my email. That address is alan@alancross.ca. There's my own website, a journal of musicalthings.com. I've never missed a day updating it, and that's since 2011. There's tons of music news. There's information, recommendations 7 days a week, and there's a free daily newsletter that you should get, and I promise I'll never, ever spam you. Technical production, if you don't know by now, is by Rob Johnston. We'll see you next time. I'm Alan Cross.